What if everything you desire is already yours, just waiting for you to claim it? Here's how. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I invite you to turn your attention inward, to examine the silent movements of your own consciousness, for it is there that the evidence of your manifestation is unfolding. You have asked, you have assumed, and now you seek the signs that what you have impressed upon your mind is on the verge of materialization. But understand this, manifestation is not something that happens to you, it happens through you. It is not an external force granting your desires, but the natural outpicturing of your inner state. And so the question is not whether it is coming, but whether you have the awareness to perceive it. The first sign that what you have imagined is moving into form is a shift in your inner dialogue. You no longer speak from a place of longing or uncertainty. You do not question whether it will come or if you are worthy of it. Instead, you find yourself naturally thinking from the end, feeling as though it is already done. This is not forced, it is an effortless knowing. The conversations in your mind reflect the reality you have claimed. Your thoughts, once filled with doubt, now flow with confidence. You may not even realize the change at first, but when you observe yourself, you will notice a quiet assurance that was not there before. This is the first sign that your assumption has taken root. Another sign reveals itself in the way the world responds to you. The outer world is nothing more than a mirror reflecting your inner state. As your assumption hardens into belief, people begin to interact with you differently. Conversations, events, and even casual encounters seem to align in ways that confirm your desire is on its way. You may overhear someone speaking about the very thing you have imagined, or an opportunity may arise without effort on your part. These are not coincidences. They are the shifting pieces of reality bending to your inner conviction. Pay attention, for the world is whispering back to you the truth of your assumption. Then there is the feeling of detachment. This may seem paradoxical, but the moment you truly believe in the reality of your desire, you no longer feel the desperate need to chase it. There is no urgency, no impatience. Just as you do not question whether the sun will rise tomorrow, you do not question the fulfillment of what you have assumed. It is not indifference, it is certainty. You no longer seek reassurance because you feel its presence within you. And when you reach this state of quiet confidence, the world has no choice but to conform to your assumption. As your inner state changes, you will begin to notice small manifestations, fragments of your larger desire appearing in your experience. Perhaps you have imagined abundance, and suddenly unexpected gifts or opportunities arrive. If love is your desire, you may notice a shift in how others engage with you. Warmth, affection, and attention increase. These fragments are glimpses of the greater fulfillment taking shape. Do not dismiss them as insignificant. They are signs that the bridge of incidents is unfolding, guiding you toward the full realization of what you have claimed in consciousness. Another sign is the deep sense of gratitude that arises before physical evidence appears. This gratitude is not a forced practice, but a spontaneous expression of your inner knowing. Without any visible proof, you feel thankful as if it were already yours. You wake up with a sense of appreciation, your heart lighter, your mind at peace. This is not because of what you see, but because of what you know. And when you reach this state, you are standing at the threshold of manifestation, for you are no longer seeking, you are simply allowing. Then finally there comes a moment when doubt ceases to exist, not because you have willed it away, but because it no longer has a place in your mind. You do not entertain thoughts of failure or impossibility. The old fears and anxieties have lost their grip on you. Even if the outer world has not yet shifted, you do not question. You do not look for evidence, because you are already living in the reality of your assumption. And when this happens, manifestation is inevitable. So observe yourself, for the signs are always there. The world is responding to your every assumption, shaping itself to match the reality you have claimed within. You do not need to force or struggle. You only need to recognize that creation is finished. What you have assumed is already set in motion, and as you persist in that state, it must come to pass. The signs are not to make you believe. They appear because you already believe. And as you continue to dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the world will reveal to you what you have known all along. That imagination is the only reality, and what you have assumed in mind must be made manifest in your world. The world you experience is nothing more than the outpicturing of your assumptions. Everything you call reality is but a reflection of the state you have accepted as true. There is no power outside of you determining your fate, no force beyond your consciousness shaping your destiny. What you assume to be real with conviction will harden into fact. If you desire to see change in your life, you must begin by changing the assumptions you hold about yourself and the world. If you assume that life is difficult, filled with struggle and lack, then no matter how much effort you exert, your experience will reflect that assumption you encounter. And so, if you wish to change your life, the change must begin in the mind. It is not enough to merely wish or hope. You must assume the state of your desire as if it were already so. To assume is to occupy a state so completely that there is no room for doubt. It is to feel with absolute conviction that what you seek is already yours. The mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. It simply accepts what you persistently impress upon it. If you assume that you are successful, if you feel it in the depths of your being, then success must come to you. The world must mirror that assumption, for it has no choice but to reflect what you have claimed within. There is no limit to what you can assume. If you seek love, assume that you are already loved. If you seek abundance, assume that you are already prosperous. Walk in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and do not concern yourself with how it will come to pass. The means will be provided in ways you cannot foresee. The path will unfold naturally, but only when you are steadfast in your assumption. Doubt is the only barrier between you and your desire. The moment you question whether it is possible, the moment you look to the outer world for confirmation, you weaken your assumption. To truly embody a state, you must abandon all contrary thoughts. You must be so absorbed in the feeling of fulfillment that the old state has no hold over you. The world is simply a shadow, following the movement of your consciousness. If you assume yourself to be something new, the shadow must adjust accordingly. It cannot do otherwise. But if you waver, if you shift between belief and disbelief, your results will be inconsistent, appearing and disappearing like waves upon the shore. There is no need to struggle, no need to force anything into being. Manifestation is not an act of willpower, but an act of faith. When you assume the state of your desire, when you feel it so deeply that it becomes your natural dwelling place, reality must conform. There is no other possibility. The law is perfect, and it works without exception. Observe your assumptions, for they are the cause of all that you experience. If you find yourself in undesirable circumstances, do not look outside for reasons. Look within. What have you been assuming? What thoughts have you been entertaining? Change your assumptions and you will change your life. You do not need to ask for permission to become what you desire. You do not need to wait for external validation. The moment you assume the new state, you have already set the process in motion. Everything necessary for its fulfillment will be drawn to you. The people, the opportunities, the events. Everything will rearrange itself to align with your assumption. Be patient, for the seed must take root before it bears fruit. Do not dig it up to check if it is growing. Trust that it is done, and walk in the confidence that your assumption is now your reality. If you persist, if you remain unwavering in your state, what you have assumed will become visible in the world around you. There is nothing to force, nothing to chase. Assume the feeling, dwell in it, and let the world respond in its own time. Your only task is to hold firm in your belief, to refuse to entertain any thought that contradicts your assumption. If you can do this, if you can truly live in the state of the wish fulfilled, then you will come to know the great truth. That assumption is the only power, and what you assume with conviction must be made manifest. Everything you desire already exists in potential. The only barrier between you and its manifestation is your own assumption. There is no external force delaying your good, no power outside of you withholding your desire. The only question is whether you are thinking of your desire or thinking from it. The difference between the two is the difference between longing and possession, between wishing and knowing. To think of something is to acknowledge its absence, to place it at a distance. But to think from it is to occupy it fully, to feel as though it is already yours. Manifestation is not about bringing something into existence. It is about aligning yourself with a reality that already is. There are infinite states, infinite possibilities, each existing now. Your assumption selects which one you will experience. If you assume lack, life will show you lack. If you assume abundance, abundance will reveal itself to you. You do not need to ask how this will happen, for assumption is the law that governs all manifestation. It does not require effort, only belief. Many fail to manifest their desires because they are caught in a cycle of waiting. They believe they will feel different once they see the evidence, but manifestation does not work that way. The feeling must come first. The evidence follows. The world is nothing but a mirror, reflecting the state you occupy. If you persist in feeling as though your desire is already yours, reality will conform to that assumption. This is not philosophy or wishful thinking, it is law. To prove this truth for yourself, observe how your moods and assumptions dictate your daily experiences. When you wake up expecting a difficult day, does life not prove you right? When you assume someone will treat you poorly, do they not fulfill that expectation? This is not coincidence. It is the natural outpicturing of your state of consciousness. Change your assumption, and you change the way the world responds to you. You have been given the ability to enter any state at will. There is no need to struggle against the present conditions, for they are merely the result of past assumption. Instead, turn within and claim the state of your desire. If you wish to be prosperous, assume that you already are. If you wish to be loved, assume that love is already yours. Feel it deeply as though it were undeniable, and then let the world rearrange itself to reflect that truth. The moment you assume a new state, the bridge of incidents begins to unfold. You may not see the full picture, but each event is leading you toward the realization of what you have claimed. Do not judge by appearances. The path may not always make logical sense, but trust that it is leading you exactly where you need to be. There is no need to manipulate circumstances, no need to force anything into being. The assumption itself is the cause, and the world must yield to it. Most people remain in their undesired states because they continue to react to appearances. They see lack and reaffirm it. They experience delay and assume it will continue. But manifestation requires that you abandon the evidence of the senses and trust the unseen reality within. If you persist in assuming the fulfillment of your desire, even when nothing in the outer world suggests it, you will bring it forth with certainty. Do not concern yourself with how long it will take. Time is only a reflection of your belief. If you believe it will take years, it will. If you believe it is already done, the world will move swiftly to prove you right. The process is only delayed when you waver between states, shifting between belief and doubt. But the moment you remain faithful to your assumption, time bends to your conviction. You do not need permission to step into a new reality. There is no force outside of you granting or denying your desires. The only requirement is that you embody the state you wish to experience. Walk in it, think from it, dwell in it as if it were already yours. The world will take care of the rest. The mind is the only reality, and what is impressed upon it must be expressed in the world of form. Imagination is not a passive faculty, but the very means by which creation takes place. Every experience, every event, every circumstance is nothing more than the manifestation of what has been assumed in consciousness. There is no separation between the unseen and the seen. The outer world is only the reflection of the inner state. To change what is witnessed in the world, one must first change what is assumed to be true. There is no need to wait for confirmation before believing. To wait for evidence is to doubt the power within. The world does not precede the assumption. The assumption precedes the world. It is only when a state is assumed as real, felt as true, that it takes on form and substance in external reality. What is impressed upon the subconscious mind must find expression, for imagination creates reality. It does not ask whether something is possible or impossible. It simply accepts what is impressed upon it as truth and brings it forth into experience. The greatest mistake is to believe that imagination is separate from reality. That which is imagined with conviction is just as real as that which is seen. The senses deceive by making it appear that the outer world exists independently, but nothing could be further from the truth. The world is the shadow of consciousness, shaped and molded by the assumptions held within. The form may change, but the cause is always the same. An unseen act of imagination brought forth into being. If one desires to change any condition in life, it must first be changed in imagination. To assume that something is true, even when the senses deny it, is the only path to true transformation. The moment a new state is assumed, the mind and body begin to respond to it as if it were already fact. The inner conversations shift, the emotions align, and the world moves to make it so. This is not a technique, it is a law that operates whether one is aware of it or not. There is no need to force or struggle, for imagination is effortless. The only requirement is to persist in the assumption of the desired state without wavering. The moment doubt enters, the process is interrupted. The mind must be trained to remain faithful to what is imagined, regardless of appearances. If one truly believes in the reality of the assumption, nothing can prevent its fulfillment. Signs will follow, but they are not to be sought. They appear as natural consequences of the assumption, not as prerequisites for belief. The world shifts subtly at first, offering glimpses of the unfolding manifestation, a word, a coincidence, an unexpected turn of events. All serve as reminders that the assumption is taking shape. These are not random occurrences, but the movements of reality bending to align with the state that has been claimed within. The greatest power is the ability to feel oneself into any desired state and remain there. This is the secret to all transformation. It is not about hoping or wishing, but about assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled and allowing that feeling to take root in consciousness. The longer one remains in the state, the more natural it becomes, and soon it is no longer an assumption, but an unquestionable reality. Doubt is the only obstacle. The world will test conviction, presenting challenges that seem to contradict the assumption. But these are nothing more than reflections of past states, remnants of old assumptions, dissolving in the face of the new. If one remains faithful, ignoring the evidence of the senses and holding firmly to the assumption, the world must shift accordingly. It has no choice, for it is only the mirror of consciousness. Imagination is not limited by time or space. The moment a state is entered in imagination, it is as real as any physical experience. The mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. It simply accepts what it is given. To assume success, to assume health, to assume love, is to plant the seed for its inevitable manifestation. The only requirement is to persist until it becomes so natural that the world cannot help but reflect it back. Everything in life is responding to assumption. The relationships, the opportunities, the circumstances, all are shaped by the unseen movements of imagination. What is claimed within must be expressed without. This is the unbreakable law, the principle upon which all creation rests. To master it is to master life itself. The moment an assumption is made and accepted as true, the unseen forces of creation begin their work. The world, which seems so fixed and unchangeable, is nothing more than the shadow of consciousness, shifting in accordance with the states that are occupied within. Nothing exists independently of the mind that perceives it. All things are drawn into being through the movement of imagination, and nothing appears in life that has not first been claimed in consciousness. To persist in an assumption, despite all outward appearances, is to command reality itself. The world will always seek to affirm what is most deeply believed. If one clings to doubt, the world will provide endless proof of its validity. But if one dares to assume boldly, to live in the state of the wish fulfilled, without question or hesitation, then the world must reshape itself to match that conviction. It is law, and law does not fail. Every event, every circumstance, every encounter is the result of what has been entertained in imagination. The subconscious mind does not reason or argue. It accepts as true whatever is impressed upon it with feeling. This is why it is not enough to merely repeat words or affirmations. If there is no deep conviction behind them, they hold no power. But the moment an idea is accepted and felt as true, it begins to harden into fact. The outer world bends to reflect the inner assumption, for there is no separation between cause and effect. The only reason a desire seems delayed is that one has not fully assumed its reality. If there is still a sense of longing, a feeling of separation, then the state of fulfillment has not yet been claimed. One cannot desire something and at the same time assume it is already theirs. These are two opposing states, and only one can be occupied at a time. To manifest, one must leave behind the state of wanting and enter the state of having. This is done not through effort but through feeling, by assuming the mood, the attitude, and the inner conviction that the wish is already accomplished. The natural tendency of the mind is to revert to what is familiar. This is why so many struggle to persist in their assumptions. They waver between belief and doubt, allowing the evidence of the senses to dictate what they accept as real. But the senses only show what has already been assumed in the past. To create something new, one must abandon the need for validation and trust in the unseen reality within. It is not necessary to know how the assumption will come to pass. It is only necessary to remain faithful to it. Signs will follow, but they should never be the focus. If one looks constantly for proof, they are demonstrating that they do not truly believe. True faith does not seek confirmation, for it knows that what is assumed must be made manifest. The moment a new state is occupied, the world begins to shift. It may start with small coincidences, whispers of change in the air, a feeling that things are moving even when nothing seems different on the surface. These are the first stirrings of manifestation, the early signs that the unseen is becoming seen. Every great change begins in the unseen world of imagination. There is no force outside of consciousness shaping destiny. The only determining factor is the state one chooses to embody. There are infinite versions of reality, each waiting to be selected. The choice is made not by effort, but by attention, by dwelling in the assumption that feels most natural and true. If one wishes to experience abundance, they must assume they are already abundant. If they wish to experience love, they must assume they are already loved. There is no other way. The mistake most people make is in believing they must first see before they can believe. They wait for the world to change before they adjust their assumptions. But reality does not work this way. The assumption must come first. The world will follow. The law is perfect and unfailing. The moment one fully assumes a new state and remains there, reality must rearrange itself to reflect that state. There are no exceptions. There is only the question of whether one will persist or allow themselves to be swayed by appearances. If there is any doubt, look to past experiences. Consider how states of mind have shaped previous events. Notice how expectations, fears, and beliefs have played out in reality. These are not coincidences, but direct reflections of consciousness. What is held within is always expressed without. By changing the inner world, the outer world must change in response. The work is not to manipulate the external, but to remain faithful to the desired assumption. This is the only effort required, to refuse to accept anything contrary to the desired state and to persist until it becomes natural. When this is done, manifestation is inevitable. The world has no choice but to reflect what has been claimed in imagination. Everything in life unfolds according to the assumptions held within. The unseen movements of consciousness dictate the events that appear in the world. There is no randomness, no luck, no force outside of awareness shaping destiny. The only cause of all that is experienced is the state of mind one occupies. Whether one realizes it or not, they are always assuming something to be true, and life is constantly proving those assumptions correct. The challenge is not in learning how to manifest, but in becoming aware of the manifestations that are already happening. To assume a state is to dwell in its reality before the senses confirm it. The world will always try to reflect the dominant state of consciousness, and if one remains unwavering in their assumption, it must become fact. But most people do not persist. They shift between belief and doubt, allowing the evidence of the senses to dictate what they believe is possible. Yet the senses do not create reality. They only reveal past assumptions that have already taken form. To create something new, one must rise above appearances and trust in the unseen reality within. There is no waiting in manifestation. The moment an assumption is made and truly accepted, the process is set in motion. It is only the wavering mind, the questioning heart, that introduces delay. The assumption must be felt with certainty, as though no other possibility exists. The world cannot help but rearrange itself to accommodate this belief. There is no need for effort, no need to manipulate circumstances, for the assumption itself is the only creative force at work. Doubt is the only obstacle. The mind is conditioned to look for proof before belief, but manifestation requires the opposite. One must believe first without evidence, and then allow reality to align accordingly. To doubt is to push the manifestation further away, to remain in a state of separation rather than fulfillment. Every time doubt creeps in, it must be met with unwavering conviction. The assumption must become so natural that it is no longer questioned, no longer something hoped for, but something known. The feeling of knowing is the key to all creation. It is not enough to want something or to visualize it occasionally. The desire must be accompanied by the absolute certainty that it is already done. This is not about blind faith, but about recognizing the power of assumption. The world is only a reflection, and it cannot show anything that has not first been assumed as true. When one assumes a state, they begin to see the world differently. They interpret events in ways that confirm their belief. Their thoughts, actions, and even circumstances begin to shift in alignment with their inner conviction. The bridge of incidents unfolds naturally, often in ways that could never have been planned. One does not need to concern themselves with the how of manifestation. The assumption will find its own path to fulfillment. Life will present opportunities, circumstances will adjust, and people will act in ways that support the realization of the assumption. But none of this needs to be forced. The only responsibility is to remain faithful to the inner state, to dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and to ignore anything that contradicts it. Imagination is the true reality. The outer world is only a shadow, a delayed reflection of the movements of consciousness. To change the world, one must first change the assumptions that shape it. There is no limit to what can be assumed, for all possibilities already exist. The only requirement is to accept the desired state as fact before it is seen. The moment it is accepted, it begins to take shape in ways that seem natural and effortless. Many fail because they continue to react to the world instead of creating it. They allow circumstances to dictate their emotions, their beliefs, and their expectations. But the world is not an independent force. It is only the mirror of consciousness. To react is to remain bound to the past, trapped in a cycle of recreating what has already been assumed. To break free, one must assume a new reality and refuse to accept anything that contradicts it. Persistence is the final test. It is easy to assume something for a moment, to feel the excitement of possibility. But true mastery comes from sustaining that assumption even when the senses deny it. The world may offer resistance at first, reflecting old states before the new one fully takes hold. But if one persists, ignoring the old reflections and remaining faithful to the new assumption, the world must shift. It has no choice, for it is only the shadow of what is held within. The mind must be disciplined, trained to accept only what is desired and to reject anything contrary to that vision. This is not about forcing thoughts, but about dwelling in the state of fulfillment so consistently that it becomes the only reality known. When this is done, manifestation is inevitable. It is not a question of if, but when, and the when is determined only by the depth of belief. The moment one fully assumes a state and lives from it without question, the world aligns accordingly. This is the law, and it never fails. All that is experienced in life is the direct result of the assumptions held within. The world is not separate from consciousness, but is its perfect reflection. Every desire, every dream, every goal is already fulfilled the moment it is assumed as true. There is no force working against this truth, only the wavering of belief, the tendency to be swayed by appearances instead of remaining steadfast in conviction. To manifest is not to struggle, but to assume. It is not about waiting for proof, but living in the feeling of the wish fulfilled before the senses confirm it. The world is not an external force dictating reality. It is the mirror responding to the inner state. What is imagined with faith must find expression, for imagination is the only creative power at work. There is no limit to what can be achieved, for all things exist in consciousness and can be claimed by the one who dares to assume their reality. The path is simple but requires persistence. Doubt is the only obstacle, and belief is the only requirement. Every moment is an opportunity to dwell in the desired state, to embody its feeling, and to trust that the world must conform. Those who master this understanding no longer wait for change. They become the cause of it. They move through life with confidence, knowing that what they assume as true must be reflected back to them. Reality bends to the unwavering mind. The only task is to persist in assumption, to refuse to accept anything contrary to the desire, and to remain faithful until the unseen becomes seen. This is the great secret of creation. It is not about effort, struggle, or hope. It is about certainty. The moment a new state is fully accepted and lived from, manifestation is inevitable. The world has no choice but to yield to the one who knows their power. For the outer world is nothing more than the shadow of the inner world.